Greetings, you've arrived to the part of the internet where this strange creature now talks about the nature of the times. And good news, folks, there's nothing going on, there's nothing to talk about, so wishing you all the best. Just kidding. There's a lot going on, there's a lot to talk about, and so without further ado, let's jump into things. A couple weeks ago, October 13th, Mercury stationed retrograde in the sign of Scorpio, right opposite to Uranus. And this has been a period of revelation, disclosure, what's beneath the surface, erupting forward, real talk. And this Scorpio-Taurus polarity, we'll talk about a full moon in Taurus coming up Halloween Day. Well, this Scorpio-Taurus polarity can bring up themes of power dynamics, money, resources, property, space. Both Uranus and Mercury also rule the nervous system, and Uranus can bring about shocking, unexpected shifts. Yes, this is a restless, electrical feeling time, and we may be experiencing some sleepless nights, or if you're like me, I've had some shocking, unexpected shifts these weeks, and I felt a little bit like a lightning rod myself. We'll talk about the slowing down, the somatic therapy can be absolute essentials while we're going through this passageway where there can be so much up at once, such sudden unexpected shifts, and therefore a need to really take the time to self-care and process. Okay, so we've got this exciting and spooky Halloween full moon, October 31st. That will also be aligned with the Great Awakener, the Great Disturber, and revolutionary, the planet Uranus. Now, Uranus is transiting the sign of Taurus from 2018 through 2026, and this is one of the major indicators of the global economic upheaval, agricultural revolution, and a complete reinvention of how we globally deal with money and resources. Okay, so we can say between this Mercury retrograde, this full moon in Taurus with Uranus, there can be some anticipation and foreshadowing of the likely economic crash, or at least the economic up-down reverberation of 2021, when both Jupiter and Saturn are transiting Uranus's sign of Aquarius. So again, a little bit of anticipation. Things are changing. Things are uncertain and unpredictable. This full moon's also on my natal moon, so I'm doing this a little bit in terms of my personal expression and appearance. Halloween is the one day that I can be myself and not scare people away. Just kidding. I will scare people away no matter what. There's an uncertainty factor here with Uranus, eccentric, unpredictable, erratic, crazy, right? And this can be perplexing. What do we do with our money? What do we do with our resources? Where do we go? And generally, I'd recommend, in terms of the economic upheaval, there being a downscaling, minimalization, as well as a diversification of money or resources to experiment generally and not put all of our eggs in one basket. One thing that we can guarantee is that things will not be the same as how we've done things in the past. And so this type of openness, flexibility, and experimentation can actually be quite practical in providing self-security, Taurus. Got to be flexible for a change of plans, Uranus and Taurus. Now, Mercury in Scorpio has been raking up a tremendous depth of information from the deep ends and the hidden recesses of life, while the bright light of Uranus shining a light on the darkness. There can be so much that's there. There can be so much to process. It can be overwhelming. Again, this somatic therapy can be essential. Slow down. Breathe. Yes, this is why I come out here. Usually there's not a sound of leaf blowers, and it's simply the water and simply the air, and that's what allows me to remember what is real life versus the anxiety that can be so easily triggered these days by the amount of activity going on the outside. Now, these are also, as we'll talk about the beginning of November, the first half of November, these are some incredibly healing, but also cathartic, therapeutic weeks. And therapy, cathartic releasing, emotional processing, and healing is not always comfortable. We've got the Sun quincunx to Chiron the first week of November, this last week of October. So there's this kind of going on the operation table. Have things move. There's a tension here. There's a friction here, like getting squeezed. It may feel a little bit like an itchy sweater or a little claustrophobic. And yet, like a tube of toothpaste, there's this purging, there's this release. And again, there is this need for space, for slowing down, for downtime, so to not lose it, not to have a panic attack, to process, to release at our own rate and pace. Yet so much therapeutic mirroring and healing conversations can take place in our interactions with others as well. Now, this evening, at almost the same time, within minutes of each other, Venus enters her own sign of Libra, and Mercury moves retrograde back into the sign of Libra. This can be very useful now in these coming weeks, beginning of November, in relieving a shift out of the intensely refining sign of Virgo and emotionally intense sign of Scorpio. Sun's still there. Mercury's moving back, where we can get a bit more objectivity, a little bit more peaceful, harmonious approach with these planets moving into Libra. Now, Libra is an air sign, so again, we can be looking a little bit more objectively with a little bit more clarity. Libra is also all about listening, so this is very much about sharing our story, meeting the other where they are, forming bridges, forming connections, and listening, putting ourselves in the other person's shoes. This doesn't necessarily come served to us on a silver platter, but there's the opportunity to put forth this effort to do this type of work, which is again really the same as therapy, as healing, as so much can come through the mirror of the other these weeks. This is Venus opposite to Chiron, November 1st, the day after our full moon. Okay. Now, in Libra, there can also be a learning through a seesawing or a ping-ponging, self and other. Our perspective, their perspective. Our truth, their truth. Our values, their values. And who am I, and who are we, and what are we doing together? Does this work? Does this hurt? What hurts or what is missing can come through the conscious ping-pong, the conscious seesawing, the space to have a conversation and both be heard and listen. Again, this takes effort and work. It requires a particular dynamic, a particular person to do this type of healing work, but it can be so valuable. Venus opposite to Chiron the first week of November is a healing through mirroring. Now this is the opportunity for healing through reflection, through relationship, through another perspective, through another set of eyes. Now, this is the opportunity I want to clarify here. This is never a requirement. We can resist it. We can resist evolution. We can resist healing because we are given the gift of free will. But when we do resist our own healing or evolution, we make things harder for ourselves. Even though we may be scared to have the conversation or scared to put it out there or scared to seek out therapy. It's so much worse when we keep it all inside. So really, we want to be vulnerable. We want to expose ourselves. We want to connect with this mirroring, with this reverberation, with this back and forth. Certainly, it is an opportune time to sit down with a therapist or any supportive individual who can show up with empathy, caring, and listening. This is, again, an outsider perspective that can provide very valuable reflections back to us. When there is no mutual intention for connection, sharing, or balance, give and take, then this is not really possible. So there has to be a mutual intention. And again, there can be this back and forth to learn about whether or not we have this type of mutual connection or not, and where we can seek support, where we can seek connection, versus where we need freedom and individuality, which is also a healing dynamic through this mirroring, is that we have to be ourselves. This is Chiron and Aries. We have to honor our own nature, our own desires, our own need for open road, freedom, to be ourselves, to be our nature, to go to the beat of our own drum. And yet we exist with other human beings who have their own past, their own experiences, We're all soft and squishy and hard and tense in various ways, and this is how we learn about each other's nature, through this reflecting, going back and forth. Now, true healers and teachers, as I see it, are always seeking out this type of connection, this type of reflection, because they constantly desire to improve, to evolve, and increase the standards of their own healing and teaching. So here I'm going to insert a mini rant. When we desire true healing and evolution and improvement, we aim towards that. And therefore we become more fearless of the difficult parts of ourself, of our life, as opposed to the popular fashion trend of avoiding, denying, and sweeping these parts under the rug, or behaving like we're all finished, we're all perfect, and we're all done. My regular viewers know how often I point out these dynamics because the New Age movement has too many fake, harmful, biased, or plain stupid beliefs and ideas that provide people with the excuse to deny, avoid their own healing, and therefore suffer. The New Age is divided into shadow avoiders and shadow deniers. And this is a dynamic I would like to point out. This is a divide and a discernment that we all need to learn. Shadow workers are the ones considered dark and scary by the shadow deniers. And because shadow workers are complex, and it's messy sometimes, and it's a full spectrum experience, and there's full spectrum emotions, and it's not just light, it's not just fluffy, it's full spectrum. Okay. Now, the shadow deniers are the ones that are likely to cause serious harm because they're avoiding or denying their own unconscious stuff, which can then become a hindrance or a harm to others. The New Age movement has big businesses and many popular so-called teachers that set people up to deny their shadow. This actually creates harm. It perpetuates darkness. But you can get away with it in the New Age movement, and this is something to be aware of. It's like, research your teachers. Type in your teacher, your favorite astrologer's name, followed by abuse. Find out the shadow of every person, because we do not know anybody until we know their shadow. Those shadow deniers in the New Age movements will never admit or talk about their shadow, and that's a big red flag that they're superficial, cheap, inauthentic human beings. And there may even be teachings in what they're saying that may be avoidant, disassociative, and harmful. Okay, I'll give an example here. QAnon is a popular conspiracy theory in the United States, completely formulated for shadow deniers. Why? Because it puts blame on an obviously made-up and fictitious enemy as a means of bypassing the actual darkness in politics that is way more complex than demons eating babies, right? But demons and mass hysteria have been used to brainwash and manipulate the population for thousands of years. It's really a classic move. And this is an objective reflection of the astrology. I put out a video 6 months ago on conspiracy theories in April that was all about Neptune square the moon's nodes, which is going to be increasing by the end of this year. United States election time, this is going to be most exact. And that Neptune square the moon's nodes can be a collective indication of mass hysteria. People going off the deep end. People losing it, people going crazy, people ending their lives. Neptune square the moon's nodes. Now, again, I've talked about these dynamics for years. That the denial and the avoidance of our own shadow by inventing bad guys outside of ourselves is what actually creates and perpetuates evil. My favorite example of this, coming from Rob Bresney, amazing astrologer and poet, is that, well, it's a historical fact. In the medieval age, cats were considered ambassadors of the devil. And so cats were exterminated by the many thousands, maybe even millions, blamed, right? Oh, badness isn't like in the system. It's not in us. It's not in our interactions. No, it's cats. And cats are murdered by the millions, which directly led to the Black Plague being spread by rats. So, again, when we blame invisible bad guys outside of ourselves and don't take accountability for the actual depth and complexity of life, we create and perpetuate evil. The reason more astrologers aren't talking about QAnon and that, well, some of them are crazy themselves, but the other reason is astrologers are afraid of losing their clientele, they're afraid of losing money, and so they got to be politically correct. It is one of the weakest, cheapest, most uncaring way to approach this dynamic. I'm being political right now because it's not just about Republicans and Democrats. No, this is about harm. This is about going off the deep end and inventing invisible enemies, which creates evil. It's not a political statement at all. It's like, whoa, this is the world in which we live in. These patterns that have repeated for thousands of years are still repeating. No person in any type of teacher authority role should be sitting by the sideline and, oh yeah, that's totally okay, the way the Nazis did in World War II. So we need to talk about these things, even if it's a little controversial. So, end rant. Okay, Venus opposite to Chiron. These weeks can also bring up the money dynamic again, resources, energy exchange. Is it working or is it not? It can be a little bit tough right now, but we can work things out. Again, it brings up the dynamic of union and separation. Balance between personal needs for freedom, to act on our own desires, versus connecting with like minds who share our values. Do we actually share our values? Are we actually able to connect? Are we actually free? Are we just submitting or conforming to others? Are we just people pleasing? These would be Libra shadow propensities versus the Aries shadow propensity. Well, I do whatever the heck I want and people can eat it. Well, obviously there's a healthy in between, and this is what we can all be exploring in some way, shape, or form through these healing mirrors through our relationships. There is a need for openness, therefore, honesty. There's an exploration of boundaries, this Venus and Libra opposite to Chiron. How open and closed we are. There's a need for openness to have these discussions. Again, big, exciting full moon on Halloween. Woo! Conjoined Uranus. Restless, exciting, spontaneous, shocking. I mean, this has got to be a great full moon for Halloween. Again, this can bring up economic situation, money, resources, sudden shifts, sudden adjustments. Again, this brings up the need for sovereignty, simplification, space. Do we have that time to settle down and process all of these changes? This full moon is kind of waking us up to these situations. Okay. We all need space in some way. We all need sovereignty. I see so many people, for example, going through this adjustment this year because of the lockdown and the economic situation. Is it's like, oh, we need space, we need time, we need to be able to relax and settle down. These, like Taurus, is basic survival needs. It's a bed to sleep in, it's food to eat, it's agriculture, so it's like this huge adjustment in terms of money and agriculture, but there can be this way to simplify. I've been talking about tiny home living, permaculture, detaching from the failed system and finding the means to do energy exchange, bartering, trades with local communities. This is going to be really, really quickly taking off this next year, 2021. And again, what we may even be feeling, processing, experiencing in our nervous system is some of the foreshadowing, the excitement. Everything's about to change. Everything's hanging on by a thread. And what do we do here? And again, I would say the diversification, not putting all your eggs in one basket, but kind of spreading things out, having different communities, different people, different places. I mean, this is what I'm hearing and seeing that I think reflects this Uranian dynamic where we've got to be experimental in order to reinvent, to innovate new possibilities, new ways of dealing with these dynamics. How can we get our own, basic human needs? And if we can figure that out, a lot of things can open up from here. Creativity, innovation, entrepreneurial directions. If we can get the bare minimum, Taurus, figured out, I got that bed, I got the food, I got this space, it's clear, it's open, I can breathe. My nervous system is not being triggered every 2 seconds. this is like where our species is at this time. And even though this is a challenge right now because of the evolutionary dynamics of where we are as a species, the society, the world, the belief system, the conditioning, what you're supposed to do to earn money, what you're supposed to do for your job, that's the stuff that we're breaking down. And once we have that stuff broken down, it's like, wow, life is so much more simple and so much more open than we've been led to believe in the past. So again, this is like an exciting time where it's like we're all being jostled around and we have to let go of certain things and we're trying to grab onto other things. And if we can just provide that space where we realize we don't have to grab on to that much to be totally solid and stable in ourselves, this is like Zen Buddhist wisdom, right? I believe this was the full moon that the Buddha was enlightened under, the full moon in Taurus. And he was trying to get enlightened that ascetic path. It's complex, it's hard, we got to do rituals. And it's not until a little girl brings the Buddha a bowl of rice and he comforts his body, his stomach, his senses, that raises the level of his consciousness and he achieves enlightenment. So Taurus can be ridiculously simple. We have this huge couples quarrel and this huge fight and all of this intensity, and we just needed a snack and a little bit of a nap. And if we incorporate a little bit more snacks, a little bit more naps, a little bit more orgasms, our nervous system is that much more calm and centered. And then this whole drama was irrelevant. We didn't realize how simple our solution actually was because we have not been given the permission, the vantage point, the space and time to recognize just how more ridiculously simple our actual problems are, So there's a little bit of Taurus wisdom for this full moon, but it's an experiment. We're all really like digging into these areas, playing around with the raw materials at hand. And as much as we can feel comfortable doing this pioneering work, I think it can really pay off in the future. So what we don't want to do is grab onto the old failing system that's crumbling. We don't want to grab onto the old Roman emperor, the old oppressors, just because that's what we're familiar with. And again, we see this dichotomy in the collective consciousness. I've been talking about it all year. Just as there are shadow deniers and shadow workers, there are people that want evolution, change, and progress, and there are people that want to go backwards. And there's a real dichotomy that's here. But of course, if we align with pioneering, our lives improve. Even though it is uncertain, even though we don't always know what's coming next, if we can trust that improvement is possible, well, then we open the door for such improvements to come in. Versus this staunch traditionalism that is only closing the door to any type of progress, which is essentially a type of imprisonment that we all have to first detect and identify. So these are unconscious things, unconscious programs we run in ourselves all the time. It's cultural, societal conditioning. We're really looking at this stuff these days. Not only with the full moon on Uranus, the great deconditioner, the great liberator, the rule breaker is Uranus. I'm fucking sick of this shit as Uranus this week. But then we've got Mercury station direct, 25 degrees Libra on November 3rd. This is where our prior new moon in Libra was as well, and Mercury is going to square Saturn the entire first week of November. Now this brings up this tension and this challenge between the innovation, the creativity, the what we love and value and want to talk about, what we want to share, where we want to be, and the conditioning, the traditionalism, the bureaucracies, the challenges coming from the world, the landlord, the boss, the authority. Mercury station direct square to Saturn can bring a perspective of this puzzle like we're seeing it from all angles. And it can be a little, heavy, scrutinizing, practical. We can be seeing what's working and what isn't. We can see what we like to see. We're seeing a little bit of what we maybe don't want to see. And what's in between is our creative goals and how we can practically express them. So this is about planning, pathfinding, adjusting. Again, a little bit of back and forth, what we want to do and how we're doing it procedurally. There is a challenge of communication here, a challenge to be open, a challenge to be expressive. This is like, hey, we're trying to do this healing work. We're trying to do the mirror of reflection, and there's doubt, Saturn. It's like, I don't really know if I believe you, or that's not what I've seen, or, I can't really agree with that. And then this becomes a challenge in communication. So we have to address these things, address those doubts, address the conditioning, address the skepticism. It's like when I'm doing an astrology reading, we don't want to avoid the doubts or the skepticism. It's like, where are you doubtful? Where are you skeptical? That's valuable material. That's how we get into the real juicy stuff. Okay, so communication and relationship is a two-way street. This is also something that we need to bear in mind. It's a mutual openness, a mutual caring. Again, otherwise we can't carry on our own shoulders a failed relationship or a failed dynamic if it does not work. Mercury station square to Saturn is like these shaman's horns, scrutinizing, heavy. There's a lot of knowledge. Sometimes the more that we know, the more challenging something is. Like if we have to choose from a selection and we have a greater, selection, more possibilities, the harder it is to choose. Well, how do I know exactly which one is going to be the best for me? So these are the types of decisions that we can be making, and it's an important time to make these decisions, to remain open to the process, to remain open to adjustment, to do the communication and the back and forth. Again, this is about listening, even though listening can sometimes be challenging. When we feel hurt or we feel triggered, we want to shut off, we want to run away, we want to run into our hole. And we necessarily do sometimes, but enough to fill up our glass, to re-enter life, to re-enter relationship, because it's through relationship. It's through intimacy that we really learn, grow, and evolve. Relationships are so valuable, and this is what we're looking at. Is this working? Is this my value system? We can use this focus and scrutiny to adjust our will and orientation in terms of how we're relating with others, our work, money, and resources, properly and effectively to connect and share ourselves with the world. For an example, this could be like our job. Do we really want to do this? Well, an absolute jackpot situation is when we value, when we enjoy our job. It's not just work that pays the bills. It's something that makes us feel fulfilled, and it honors our individuality. These are the cardinal signs in the zodiac: Aries, Libra, Cancer, Capricorn. It's accomplishing in the world, but it's also emotionally fulfilling. It honors our nature and our individuality, and it's something that we can share and connect with others. So there's this work, there's this readjustment to bring all of this together. And this does take time, it does take patience, it does take effort. So a lot can be coming together, but again, this push-pull, it's a very productive time. I've been saying this the whole last several months. This Mars retrograde period has been an overhaul. And this is to give us the push that's going to take us through the end of this year into 2021. Where 2021 is a very active, exciting, kind of alarming, but there's wind filling the boat sails. There's a sense of momentum and nobody's falling asleep. These are some exciting, revolutionary, groundbreaking years. And we're in this turning point. We're in this turning point of pushing, making these adjustments. We've been in the underworld. We've been digging up all this stuff. We've been working with the raw materials at hand. I've talked about molting the last several months. Melting down to restructure. And in the next video, we'll talk about Mars now stationing direct. Finally, November 13th, Jupiter will be conjoined Pluto for the last and final time, November 12th. Venus is now in Libra for the next rough month. For those who are a part of my Patreon community, we will be talking about Venus, Libra, Venus through all of the signs and houses in my Astro School. Patreon members can also receive additional videos every single month. I do an online Q&A where you can submit your birth chart with any question related to your life or what's happening right now. And then we go through all of these questions and these charts, both in a live Q&A, and for those who cannot attend the live Q&A, I also do a recorded Q&A. These are very valuable information exchanges. For those who would want to learn more astrology, it's a really great way to see how astrology can be practically used. And it's another great way to get a little, 5-second chart reading, because it's just one question. It's not your whole life. One specific question can get answered every month from yours truly about your life, your experience, and your chart. And I find that this creates a really supportive type of feeling as well. So feel free to join our community if you're looking for that type of learning, advice, or support, as we have an online chat room. And there's a wonderful circle of souls, that are showing up, that are communicating, forming friendships, sharing themselves, and it's been a beautiful inspiration. And finally, before I have to sign off, I just want to say thank you so much to all of you, your support, your comments. It's been unbelievable to me this year. This has been one of the most challenging years of my life, which I don't find to be too uncommon at this particular time. But the amount of support, all y'all's comments on these videos, I don't respond to, but I do always read these comments. And it's just, it's been a light at the end of the tunnel, honestly. I come out here and I talk to a camera alone in the woods. So these little feedbacks and reflections that I receive from all of y'all, truly and sincerely, it has been what has kept me going through all of these years. So sincerely, thank you so much.